Hello, my name is Petar Puskarich, and I'm going to talk about the Apple III Twiggy controller, or otherwise known as the Apple III Una/Duo Intelligent Controller. The particular one I've got is part number 653103-nothing, but it's the 1982 version of the card. I'd like to start out a little bit with how I came into possession of this unique piece of history, even if I'm not sure if it's really a prototype or not, because it was a fully fleshed out product that was just never sold. That's what it appears to be anyway. Back in, say, December 15th of 2015, I happened to actually make a purchase from a Mr. David Levenhus to purchase his Apple III Plus system that he had for sale, which came from apparently an ex-Apple engineer. We weren't quite sure who it was, but he had this unit, and it was in great shape. And I was willing to drive the hour and 10 minutes or so south, a little bit say south of San Jose, California at the time when I was living out there, and picked it up and brought it home. And when I did that, this is what I found. I opened the one box, and it was a mint condition, basically brand new Apple III Plus in the box with matching serial number box and everything. I've never had one of those before, but so very, very, very excited to get that. And then once I put the system together, this is what it looked like, because it had the Apple III Plus monitor. It had the external floppy, but the floppy is kind of special because it also has an Apple asset tag on it, which is pretty cool. And there it is there, the 15222. Yeah, so this unit was one of the survivors that apparently did not get returned back into Apple when they were collecting them all at the end of the cancellation cycle. This particular unit also came with a few other nifty little boards that were either experimental or prototypes or whatever. The little piece on the left is the battery box that would go on one, and the regular Apple III for the part of the upgrade to a 3 Plus, or just adding the clock. The card on the right is one of the two versions I've got of the Game IO or Game 3 by Swafford Engineering. I've never seen those ever before, but apparently of the two cards, this particular one has the DIP 16 with the cable for a standard 2E style joystick to be attached, which was pretty neat. Not exactly sure what the little switch on the bottom there does though. And here's a close-up of the other card that came with it. And this one, yeah, I do not know what the little micro clip was actually doing. If anyone knows, that'd be awesome to find out too. But again, this was all part of this great package. And even from the beginning parts of it, it showed lots of promise for some neat, fun things. And that's where that intelligent controller came in. Another piece that came was the Apple III serial card, which is really neat because it has the giant RX-TX selector, or DCE DTS, was a giant push button switch. Instead of using the little standard Super Serial 2 switch block, you just push it in or push it in to pull it back out. But that came with the unit as well, and it also came with a profile controller. I already had a profile to hook up to it, and I actually have used it, and that card works well too. But this is the little card that we're talking about today, at least from my point of view. It's a fuzzy picture, and that'll come into play later when I go to prove that this is the card that we're looking for out of Tony's estate. So what we're seeing right now is basically a 1982 card. That's down in the bottom right. There's some marker on it that says good. And then there's an EEPROM that says 20X, which apparently is the version number, I think, because there is another card that's a year newer than this that has a 21 in that same position. And then this one has the Z8 chip with the EEPROM attached to it, riding on the top of it, just like the older Apple III profile controllers that did the low-level formatting for the profile drives. It's a setup just like that, but have no idea really what it actually does anything different yet. We never got that far whenever Tony and I were working on it. And there's a close-up of what it is. And this is it's a 2716 EEPROM, Reve Apple 82. It's sitting there on the Z803 chip. And then at the time here, and this was when I had it brand new, and when I opened it up, this transistor up here basically is in line with this rectangular block, and it looks like it looks decent. And there's another close-up of the 20X and the slightly fuzzy. And these slightly fuzzy pictures are from my really messed up S9 phone at the time when I got the images. And having blurry images is something I do not recommend, and I learned the hard way, that when you're trying to prove that you own something later on, it's good to actually see the detail in the pictures that you've saved. All right, go to the next one. And then here's a much clearer image that I actually did have in the collection I was taking these of. And in the bottom part here, where you actually see the little line that crosses the thicker trace that runs through the L in controller. And that little line of this image is basically how I proved that this was my card that was found at Tony's estate. All right. This particular picture is from a slightly newer revision. It's a 1983 card that Robert Justice has. And he was also able to take a look at the drivers that were found for the cards. And apparently, without having a unifile or duofile to hook them to, or Twiggy drives, we're kind of guessing, and it looks like they're at least loading into the OS, but the drivers that were found recently, they actually do work with both of our cards. At least they load into SOS. Not sure what they do yet. One of the next things I want to try, now that we have drivers that actually work, and I'm not guessing how to use the card as much, is basically take what we learned and either create like a virtual Twiggy if we can, at least for I/O interaction ways, or hook up a logic analyzer to the pins and just see what gets triggered when we actually do file calls and things like that. The drivers for this card were actually located on April Fool's Day of 2023 this year by Tom Fricker, who basically was looking at an old Lisa profile drive that came from an ex-Apple engineer, and he discovered that there was a folder on the particular drive that basically said Apple III, and there was a drivers underneath it. And out of the blue, he sent me a contact on Facebook and asked me if I would like to take a look, and I said sure. And the files that he sent me indeed were two versions of the driver, one for unifile and one for the duo file, and they were labeled 1983 as well. So they were probably more for this particular card than my earlier one, but they seem to work. And internal to the firmware itself on both of them, they are labeled 1982. So it's kind of hard to say, if it's exclusive of the other. I think it's going to work for both, but we will certainly find out. Okay. And then for those that would like to see what's actually going on, this is a regular Lisa, one of the first ones with the Twiggy drives, but on top of it has the two Twiggies inside of an external casing, and that's what they call the duo file. And that's what this card would control. Down on the bottom right, which looks like kind of like a more whitish colored Apple III drive, that's a unifile. So it's the 5 1/4 Twiggy inside a single casing. But this is what we're aiming to use this card with to control. We briefly had access to one of the unifiles via another collector, but apparently that drive is now gone due to the issues with Tony's estate and how it was partially dispersed. So we're still trying to figure out if anyone has a unifile that can be plugged in with any of these controllers, and see if we can actually use the drivers to make the Apple III card do its thing. I've never heard of anyone who actually has a duo file though. So that'll be something, if anyone has one, I'd love to try to use it. All right. This is a picture of the card as I received it back in, let's see, that would have been about April 11th of this year. So very shortly after the drivers were found, the card was found in Tony's estate, and believe it or not, the card was in a drawer that was basically filled with just a bunch of junk on top of it. And this is a picture, I believe, of Sean Fahey, who has it there. And you can see down here in the lower right where it says good, and there's that line that goes across that thick trace. And that's what I also used to help match when Stavros and Sean called me and said, "Hey, we think we found your card. Can you prove it?" And I was scrambling to find any picture I had because I didn't have the one that said the 402 at the time that I could find. And I couldn't remember any of the words or anything like that. I couldn't say it had good written on it because I just didn't remember because I haven't seen it for a long, long time. Because at the time when I sent it to Tony, I sent it to him. I believe that was 2017 was when I sent that to him when we started working on this. But we didn't make any progress until about 2019 of creating basically reverse engineered drivers for SOS from the ground up. And he was the brains behind that. I kind of just helped more for moral support and where I could because I was just trying and learning some stuff at the same time. But he was the only person that I knew that actually had Twiggy drives that we could actually hook something to. So that's how that started. That's why Tony had my drive. Eventually, when we started getting things to work, what we ended up with, let me see here, go back. So what we ended up with was a set of drivers built for SOS that we could initiate really basic commands. Like we were able to make the drive spindle turn on of the Twiggy, and we could sort of make it move the head, but there was no real read-write action at all, and there was no block control or anything. So it was really not good. That was probably, we got to that point probably about 3 or 4 days before he passed away. And then unfortunately, that happened on October 27th of 2021 when he passed away that early morning. But then, okay, now what happens? Now it goes into a period of, well, first off, I'm really saddened and hurt and trying to figure out, why what happened, blah blah blah. And then going through those emotions. And I knew Tony from probably that would have been October of 1990 when I came to Ohio State University and finally got online. And as a lot of people have been saying at the conference here at KansasFest is that, yeah, I found my tribe. I ended up on COMPSYS Apple II and getting involved with the Apple II community all the way back then in 1990. which was the first time I've had access to the internet, really. I grew up in a small rural area of Ohio, and the only BBS at the time I had access to turned out to be a 1-800 number to a Mexican travel agency. So I had lots of fun with that one. But in order to do real things and real communication and connections with people, I had to basically get into college finally, and then get hooked up into CSA2 Usenet groups. Well, so probably about a period of about a week passes, and lots of people started contacting his family of, what's going on with his, with Tony's large prototype collection and just all the stuff that he's collected over the years. And that kind of put a sour note with the family at the time, and things basically just almost got completely shut out. Then probably about 4 months ago, there were a couple people that showed up on a couple other forums saying, "Hey, I've got all this stuff. What is it?" And I got it real cheap, blah blah blah. And now it's showing up on eBay. Well, as it turns out, friends of the family really didn't do any justice for Tony at all. So his collection basically got dispersed at least in two different ways, and you can buy pieces of it by the Who Done It 1970 on eBay right now. And some of the stuff I remember seeing in his workshop while we're there. Well, all right, so we skip forward a little bit more, and the representatives from the K-Fest committee, thank you guys for putting it together, went down and actually worked with the family and were given access to rescue as much of what was left from that the other guys left. And there was a fair amount that was recovered. But the really cool part was that they recovered my Apple III controller. And so far that I'm aware of, this is one of two that are known to still exist that might still be functional and seem to be functional. So that's where all the fuzzy pictures came in when Sean and Stavros were basically calling me saying, "Hey, can you prove this is yours so we can match it up and mail it back to you?" And I did make one comment basically saying, well, if you found a card that is the Apple III Twiggy controller, it's gonna be mine, because he didn't have one, and the only reason he has it is because I sent it to him in order to work on the drivers to see if we could make it work. So between that statement and my history with the project, with him and in the different groups, they said, yeah, okay, it's got to be yours. But it was basically rescued and saved because it was stored the night before he died in this drawer with a bunch of junk on top of it, which was really kind of strange because he made an off comment to me saying that, well, I think I'm going to put the card in a safe place because you never know what would happen. So was that foreshadowing? I don't know. But anyway, that particular placement saved it, and the two guys found it in that drawer and made sure to get it back to me, and it came back in very good shape. So thank you so much, guys, for finding it and returning it, so then we can continue this project. That's basically the history of what I have. At the current state, I'm planning on, like I said, to create a virtual Twiggy if possible. And then there was another project out there already that was trying, but it kind of dried up, it looks like. But at the minimum case, I'm going to put the logic analyzers back on it. Now that I have the drivers for it, I don't have to worry about that. I can actually exercise the different things and see what shows up on the different drive pins. And one last thing I can show is that what makes it a little bit easier is the fact that we actually do have these. We have some schematics. This is of the 1983 card. So we have this one, and then we also have the node listing for it as well. And looks like that one went away. But anyway, there is another TIFF file that was saved over the years that has the full schematic, not just the board placement pictures. So that would be very handy to have. And then the combination is, at least we got the drivers we did, but now we have the real drivers and we can move forward. So if you do have a Twiggy drive around, I would love to talk to you. If you have a unifile, even better, because then we know the cabling should work just fine. But yes, that was the Apple III intelligent controller for the unifile and duofile. Thank you very much for listening to the story and the presentation, and have a great rest of the KansasFest.
So are there any questions in the chat? Lots of nice jobs. And it's kind of amazing that it came together.
Yeah, it was just definitely a total surprise after everything went south real quick. So yeah, when the card showed up in the mail and it was in basically perfect condition, except for that one little transistor that had to be basically pushed back into place, I was very happy. Yeah, so we're really close, but we're really close the opposite way now. So now we have the drivers, now we don't have the drives. So either we create a Twiggy replacement, a work-alike of some sort, and then hook to it, or if someone actually happens to have one. I've recently heard of maybe one person over in Germany, maybe, that maybe has one, but yeah, we'll see someday if that can be put together. The worst part of it all is basically, yeah, just losing a friend in the process. And then of course we find the drivers after he passes away. But that was kind of neat, opening up those files and then passing them off to Robert, and then he validated them as well. And it's like, okay, I think we found them.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Like 40 years later.
So Josh asks a philosophical question. Is there really any utility to cloning a card that more or less doesn't exist for drives that more or less don't exist?
Nah, just because. That's good enough for me.
Yeah, a fun challenge.
Yes.
And it feels like a connection to history.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things where there's maybe only two on the planet left that at least are publicly aware. Something that was never, I guess, supposed to exist that does exist. All right, thank you all.